Amardeep. Amardeep. Amardeep.
Yes, we can start.
Yeah, I think I'll make them co-host whenever they will join. So
Okay.
we have almost.
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all in all your respective time zones. I welcome you all in this international conference on migration, diaspora, and sustainable development perspective, policies, opportunities, and challenges on behalf of Global Diaspora Forum on Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism, Center for Research on North America, and Migration Forum Asia. We have Chair Professor Amba Pande. She is associated with Jawaharlal Nehru University in the Center for Indo-Pacific Studies, School of International Study. She holds a PhD in International Study from JNU. Her research interest has been on Indian diaspora, international migration, and she has published many books and articles in national and international journals. She has been also visiting faculty in various universities like University of Amsterdam, University of South Pacific, University of Otago, National University of Singapore. Ma'am, we have 7 papers in this session.
Yeah.
So now I request you to take over the charge.
Thank you, Amardeep. Thank you very much. It is always a pleasure to be here with GRFTT and the co-host, and especially for this conference, which is turning out to be a major achievement in the field of diaspora studies. And that kind of feedback we are getting constantly from all the prominent scholars that are here in different capacities in this conference. So I welcome you all, and we will start the session now. And it is actually a very interesting session that is on Global Compact of Migration. And as far as I think, there is less awareness about this subject amongst the students and the academia. So I think this is going to be a really informative session for all of us. And the first paper that I'm going to invite in this session is on viewing female migrants through Global Compact for Migration. I mean, I tell you, this is going to be one of the favorite papers, and I'm going to learn so much from it. And this will be presented by Dr. Binita Behera, School of Law, KEET, deemed to be University, Bhubaneswar, India. Yes, Dr. Behera, please.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. I hope I live up to the expectations that you are having from my paper. It's just a very humble attempt at looking at the gender aspect through the GCM lens, the Global Compact for Migration. Yeah. So to start with, my topic is called Viewing Female Migrants Through the Global Compact for Migration. As you know, there are many givens connected as of today with female migration. There's been a sea change, and I would like to quote Professor Stephen Wertevik. In his presentation, he spoke about the super diversity and the complexity that migration itself has been acquiring, whether it is diaspora, whether it is the way migration is carrying on, or the transnationalism. So looking at the female migration, it's for so many different reasons, not just as it used to be earlier for family reunification. It's also in a big way, it is work related or job related migration. So in this study, it's I have taken few case studies, and these are from very diverse people from very diverse countries, and who have the destination countries where they have migrated are also very diverse. So I will be looking a little through them, trying to understand the nuances of the female migrants given the GCM. So as I said that women are now migrating irrespective of their level of education, the country from where they are, and the reasons for which they migrate. And also, like of course, one of the very big drivers would be the gender based patterns within the job market, either in the host country or in the destination country. But also there are many other things that in a very interesting way I saw in this study, it came out. And in such a rapidly changing scenario in the world, so here comes the Global Compact Migration, the New York Declaration, and it's an aspirational document which spells out things like safe, regular, and orderly migration. And what would it look like in our globe after the GCM has come into effect? And also, I have, apart from this theme, I have also tried to look at and understand the theme pertaining to integration within the destination countries. So, as you know, like gender is an ascriptive status, and gender has been very much taken into consideration while framing the GCM. But I have tried to capture it through real time data by talking to some of the female migrants, and they are from the continents of North America, of Australia, Africa, and Europe. So the countries of origin are namely India, Tanzania, Romania, and United States of America. And I used a tool, a questionnaire, and mostly it was telephonic or through Zoom meetings. And that is thanks to the way online meetings are happening. So three things I have tried to look at: that what were some of the reasons that led them to migrate, what were some of the issues or problems that they faced in the country where they are going, or in the host country, if I may say so, and what are their plans in future. Do they want to be here temporary basis, or do they want to be here on a long term basis? And so some of the people that I looked at is a person called Sarita. I've changed the names for ethical reasons because my respondents didn't want their names to be given. And she is about 26, and she works at present in a hospital in Sydney as nurse. She hails from Punjab, from Chandigarh, and engaged to be married, was engaged to be married this September, probably next year soon. And she came to Australia because she had an elder cousin sister who was already there with her family. So that was a very important, you can say, one of the very important reasons for which she thought of migrating to Australia, so that her safe stay would be taken care of, and she can be with the family. And there she acquired a higher master's degree, and she did not face, she said, any kind of problems with regard to accommodation even later on, because by that time she had already stayed for a good 2 to 3 years. And then she went to join her first job. She wouldn't divulge the details, and I didn't ask her, but she said that she was not very comfortable with the workplace. Her boss was a woman though, and she changed her job, and now she's comfortably placed in her second job in Sydney, and she lives by herself. She has her own flat, and she likes Australia because of the quality of life that she enjoys and the amenities that are available as compared to India, and the fact that she doesn't face any sort of overt or covert gender bias. As she said, she's never experienced discrimination because of her nationality or gender. And she said that she feels more safe here rather than in India. But one thing she pointed out, that through the media and through others, she came to know that there are some Muslim women who have migrated, women of Muslim origin, who do face some problems. And she shared some examples that most of these women, they were on dependent visa and they've joined their husband. And since they were governed by the laws, the Shia laws, the Australian laws were not very much directly applicable to them. So they were sort of trapped. But she said that she is also not very closely connected with the diaspora, but she knows that she knows people there and she very much feels part of that diaspora. And she definitely intends to stay back permanently in Australia. Her husband, to be, is going to join her. And similarly, Anna is a person of mixed origin from Kolkata. She has a Nepali, a Lepcha father and a Bengali mother. And she works as a physiotherapist in Kempsey, Australia presently. And she said that it's been 4 years now, and she's about 35 years old. And she migrated obviously for better career prospects after her master's degree from India. And she said why Australia was a preferred country, because by far physiotherapy is very well advanced. The practice of it is very well advanced here in Australia. So she had some very positive things to say about her migration. She said, yes, she did face some issues of settling down here in the new place, but she rather took it as an exciting challenge. And like, for example, she drove in India, but here again, she had to unlearn and learn the driving rules that work in Australia. And she had to do it pronto because she settled in a countryside in Kempsey, and she had to cover long distances for anything, whether it is work or to buy stuff for home or anything. And she is married, and because her husband joined her, she said on the contrary, her husband did face some issues pertaining to job. And when he came to join her, and he's been getting these kind of temporary kind of jobs, but somehow they are settled here. And coming to the discrimination issue, she said that she has faced more discrimination in India rather than in Australia, because she comes from a mixed background. She said, as a Nepali, having Nepali father, my mother's side being Bengali, they used to say, oh, you are Nepali. And the same was for my father's side. That's what she said. So she knew that she is somebody who stands out. But the way life is here, the quality of life and the acceptance that she has enjoyed here in Australia, she actually said that it's a far cry from India. And at work, she definitely earning more money is a key motivation, but also the social security benefits that are there, that are made available irrespective, without any discrimination. So she said, of course, maybe 30 to 40% of my salary I'm spending on tax, giving tax, paying tax to Australian government, but I don't mind that. It's worth it because it is spent very properly for our benefit by the state agencies. And especially with regard to the pandemic, she said the government has been specially reaching out to people who have lost their livelihood. They've helped people to cope with the situation, which is very good. And as her intermingling with the Indian community, she said she's not very closely connected. She said she doesn't fit the average Indian image of being an Indian, because she's a practicing Christian in her belief. So she said that once or twice they've attended, as family, they've attended the diaspora gatherings, but she really didn't feel very, very connected. But she doesn't mind because her integration or her inclusion into the Australian society, she would say, is almost complete. And here it doesn't really matter whether you are married or single. And this is what she was telling. And but she also pointed out that there's one thing which is called as Islamophobia, which she has noticed in the Australian society. And she actually has one of her Iranian friends, and who wanted to wear her headscarf, the hijab, as is customary. But when they came to Australia, considering the Islamophobia and environment that is there, her own father asked her not to wear it, so that she is not made, start like very distinctly visible as a Muslim, and the fear of being targeted would not then be there. So this is something that came from Anna in Australia, and then this is Namrata, who works as a software professional in the US, and she moved to the US from Bangalore, and she's based in Miami, Florida, where she lives with her family. And she said that a female migrant's marital status is decisive, because in that sense, the adjustment and the accommodating or the settling down is easier. You face less hassles. So she also, just like Anna, it was all very smooth for them, because there was a requirement of these skilled personnel. And she's a Telugu Brahmin married to a Christian person from Orissa, and they were based in Bangalore prior to US. And she really likes it here because of the clean air and the very good social ambience that they get. She is in a senior position in the company where she works. So she also said, of course, the quality of life is very high, and the amenities and the facilities that are provided by the state are praiseworthy. But she also said that she hasn't faced any gender issues in the workplace, like the glass ceiling that works in India. But in US, she has not faced, because the US HR rules are very strict pertaining to gender discrimination. So that really does not operate. And if somebody so much as to, speaks down to someone because of their gender, then even that is taken very seriously in her company. And she said that she, of course, the being a H-1B visa holder, she knows that she has to always go by the law. And why there is some issues that some Asians face is that they overstay illegally, and they don't respect the law of US. That is why they face problem. So she said that basically Americans, because of this, they do not have a very good impression on the Asian community. And yes, she also spoke about the stimulus package that was given by government of USA, which was very good. In fact, for the people who were in a lower job status, they were better off because of the stimulus package. So these are some of the things. And I would like to now just talk about Aisha, who is from Tanzania, and she migrated to Germany in 2017. She comes from Arusha in Tanzania, and she, of course, had both social and economic reasons responsible for her migration to Germany. Now, I did not speak directly to her, so I just have to gather from my questionnaire how she has answered. So she said that this was her aspired dream, and for better job prospects she went. But she said that the issues that female migrants face is very different. And she said one peculiar thing that she has faced from the Tanzanian or the African people who have settled in Germany is that they are very judgmental about a woman from Africa or Tanzania who adopts the Western lifestyle. And she said she also faced discriminations at her arrival, such as racial and the economic hardship, but she was only able to manage with help from friends and her family back home. She stayed in Germany for 3 years and is now back in Tanzania. And she said that in Germany, what she likes is the social amenities, the services that are available, the education system, and in fact that gender equality is there as compared to her home country. But her
Hello.
Yeah.
Conclude, because my voice perhaps was not audible, so I was telling you to conclude, please. This is more than 15 minutes now.
Okay, I'm done, ma'am. I'm almost done. So this is basically coming to a conclusion. I'm leaving out few due to lack of time. I've already overtaken the time that was that should have been taken by me. But some of the drivers, I would say, of migration, and also the fact that somebody is already there, a woman being there, that counts a lot. And the case studies that I've left out is of Europe, and there mostly it was a family reunification where they joined their spouse or their partner, and that is how they've arrived in the destination country. So mainly, I would like to say that if we look at these case studies through the theme of integration and inclusion in the destination country, we see that there are some changes, and we also see that it is more positive for somebody who is moving to, mostly the move is from a developing to the developed country, and in some cases from one developed country to another. And the people, they have said that one of the reasons why they've settled down is that the settling down has been very smooth. So in that sense, the bilateral from one country to another, or the international, in the wake of the global compact for migration, we can say that things have, though this is a particular class of women that I would say who are job oriented, who are much educated, and whose skill set is desirable in their destination country. And because of that, their integration becomes easier. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Binita. I'm sorry. Actually, my voice was not audible, so
No problem, ma'am. I'm
my
sorry that I've taken more time.
fine. Okay, thank you very much for this paper. I will reserve my comments for in the end, because we are already running out of time. So yeah, thank you. It was a very interesting paper. Thank you for that. So our next paper is on foreign dreams, impact of pandemic on aspirations of Indian students. This is by Tanveen Kaur and Anjali Mehra. They are from Guru Nanak Dev University. So please go ahead. I welcome you. You have around 12 to 15 minutes, please.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Uh, the topic of today's presentation is foreign dreams, impact of pandemic on aspirations of students from Indian Punjab. Last 30 years have observed the global cooperative collaborations and international social networks, resulting in mushrooming international student mobility. It is generally felt that international education is beneficial for students' personal and career development by elevating the human and social cultural capital. India is ranked second major contributor in the international tertiary pool after China. It has been observed that since the decade of 90s, student migration from India has been continuously increasing from 17 lakh 788 in 1999 to 58 lakh approximately in 2019. In 1999, India was ranked second in terms of sending students to the foreign shores, while in 2019, it was ranked second after China. United States of America, United Kingdom were the most preferred destinations for Indian students, but the number of Indian students going to United States and United Kingdom declined post-2000 as a result of stringent visa policies being adopted by both the countries. The biggest economic beneficiaries of such policies were Australia and Canada, where the former observed the increase in the number of Indian students from 2,345 in 1999 to 92,383, compounding annually at 20.16%, while the later was seeing the compound annual growth rate of 51.38%. Punjab is among the top student sending states in India to the institutions abroad, and is the typical example of the paradox that development leads to migration. A tremendous increase in the migration of Punjabi students was observed since 1990, where the number of Punjabi students moving to the foreign shores increased from 218 in 1990 to 150,000 in 2019, compounding annually at the growth rate of 41.04%. The major avenues attracting the Punjabi students were the countries of Canada, United States, Australia, and New Zealand. The pandemic of COVID-19 had negatively impacted the mobility of the Indian students in general, and Punjab was no exception. It was estimated from the Student Mobility Report of 2020 that there would be a steady decline in the mobility of Indian students in the coming years. This decline would be adversely affected by the higher education institutions that were dependent upon the international students for their revenue generation. As the students were the key drivers of revenue for the recipient country, it was realized that the impact of COVID-19 on this sector could be more severe. In case of Canada, the lockdown commenced on 13 March 2020 and which affected approximately 6 lakh international students. India accounts to have 34% of the international students in Canada, of which 70% are Punjabis. Therefore, the lockdown resulted in the emotional distress among the Punjabis in Canada. It also resulted in 22% drop in the student enrollments in the present summer semester. Australia announced the nationwide lockdown on 20th March 2020. The market of international students in Australia is also huge, with their contribution amounting to 85% of the GDP. At the time when the lockdown appeared in Australia, the around 2.5 lakh international students were stranded in Australia, of which 40% were Indians, and 1 lakh of the Indians who were not initially provided with any support from the government, leading to the condition of Indian students in Australia lonelier, hungrier, and clinging to increasingly tenuous existence. The objectives of my study were to examine the changes adopted by the government in the educational institutions and workplaces in Australia and Canada to help the international students during the time of COVID-19. And the second objective was to examine the impact of COVID-19 on the decision of students studying in Australia and Canada about returning back to Punjab once the international flights open. The study was mainly based upon the primary data, which was collected using the mixed method approach, which assesses the focus group of Punjabi students studying in Canada and Australia through a structured questionnaire sent on Google Forms. The questionnaire was structured into 3 main categories, including the demographic profile of the students, the changes adopted in the workplaces and the educational institutions after the emergence of COVID-19, and the impact of pandemic on the decision of Punjabi students regarding their coming back to the home country once the international flights open. The survey was administered to the students of Punjab in Australia and Canada during the month of April and July 2020. The participants were drawn on the basis of snowball sampling. So the positive response was received from 157 respondents, of which 83 respondents were from Canada and 74 were from Australia. Of the 74 respondents, 63.5% of the respondents were male and 36.5% respondents were females. And of 83 respondents of Canada, 67.4% of the respondents were male and 32.6% of the respondents were female, which reflected the desperation of the Punjabi families to send their male child from their families to abroad so that they could raise their standard of living at home. It also reflected the lack of employment opportunities and disillusionment from the systems at home. Most of the respondents were in the age group of 21 to 25 years, which highlighted that Punjab is unable to retain its youth in the country, questioning its demographic dividend story. Of the total sample, 97.5% of the respondents were pursuing the full-time courses, with large proportion of respondents pursuing diplomas. 26.5% were pursuing undergraduate degree. 10.45% of the respondents were pursuing the post-graduation in the institutes of Australia and Canada. This dominance of pursuit of diplomas clearly shows that the main motive of the Punjabi youth was to settle abroad and not to obtain the quality education. The second part dealt with the changes adopted during COVID-19 at the educational institutions. In order to slow down the spread of COVID-19, Canada and Australia implemented nationwide lockdowns. This resulted in national quarantines and the closure of educational institutions in both the countries. This stranded the Indian students both in Australia and Canada. So, in order to save the revenue in general that earned from the international students in particular, the higher education institutions have initiated the concept of internationalization at home, under which the students can have the international classroom experience with a global content and discussion at their places. It was highlighted, or it was observed, that 71.3% of the educational institutes in Canada and 68.8% in Australia were closed during the pandemic. 95.5% of the students in Canada and 93.1% in Australia affirmed that the changes were adopted in the educational institutions, and 100% of the respondents affirmed the institutions switched to the online mode, and the various other remote learning programs were initiated. Then the changes were adopted at workplaces also. The general practice among the students of Australia and Canada among going to these countries is to pursue some part-time job along with their studies to support their expenses. Generally, the jobs taken by the students in Canada were of waiters, salesmen, drivers, technicians, and they earned Canadian dollar 14 to Canadian dollar 21.50 per hour. And the students in Australia preferred becoming tutors, stylists, waiters, with the hourly earnings from Australian dollar 18.35 to Australian dollar 23.2. The lockdown in both the countries resulted in the complete or the partial closure of these organizations. It was reflected from the survey that in Canada, 68.8% of the student respondents were working as cashiers, waiters, carpenters, plumbers, and nurses, and were working at the same place as before. Whereas in Australia, the students who were working in grocery stores, waiters, and drivers, they worked at the same place. The demand for the security guards, nursing, and the old age care increased for the students as the locals were not ready to work in these sectors. In Canada, 31.2% of the students had to change their jobs who were working in Uber Eats, Uber drivers, as they were offered less working hours. While in Australia, those who were working as salesmen had to change their jobs. The lockdown saw that the change in the work culture was shifting to work from home. 56.1% of the respondents from Canada and 35.8% in Australia were working from home in order to attain a better work-life balance. But once the lockdown was partially lifted on 31st July 2020 in Canada and in Australia on 19th July 2020, a new type of work culture, that is hybrid culture, emerged, where the people started working partially from home and partially from their workplaces. In both the countries, social distancing is being followed strictly at their workplaces. This was reflected from the responses of the students that showed 95.5% of the places in Canada and 91.3% in Australia followed social distancing norms, unlike in case of India. The Canadian government and the Australian government has initiated different types of measures. The initiatives which were offered by the Canadian government was the permission to work for more than 20 hours for those who were working in the priority sectors such as education, health, finance, water, safety, etc. The federal government launched a SERB scheme to provide the income to those who have been negatively impacted during COVID-19 crisis. It offered $500 per week to the eligible workers. Post-graduation work permit was given to former students to gain the Canadian work experience. Initiatives which were offered by the Australian government were the international students who have been in Australia for more than 3 months and are facing the financial hardship will be able to access their superannuation funds. The international students will be able to work for more than 40 hours per fortnight. Relaxation of rules and regulations for the international students to comfortably complete their studies. JobKeeper program extended the help to those who were having temporary visas and who have been employed for more than 12 months in Australia.
Minutes.
But most of the people in Australia and Canada were satisfied with the services which were being provided, the initiatives which were being provided in both the countries. But it is estimated, but the union education, but still the students are, despite of facing so many hardships, it is estimated that 90% of the students who were intending to study in the foreign institutions are still planning to go abroad, reflecting that the craze of students has not declined due to pandemic. The Union Education Minister of India, Ramesh Pokhriyal, highlighted this issue in the draft of New Education Policy 2020 at a webinar titled India, the Global Destination for Higher Education, and was of the view that the pandemic could reverse the brain drain of the country, as the new education policy would help in uplifting the research and improving the quality of education being provided by the Indian institutes. This was affirmed when the students were asked the question that whether they want to come back to India, come back to Punjab once the international flights resume. It was perceived that 82.2% of the students were not satisfied with the help and initiatives being provided by both the countries, and 89.2% respondents from Canada and 86.2% from Australia. They were not interested in coming back to Punjab because of the lack of employment opportunities, rigidity, and the outdated curriculum. This proved to be the wake-up call for the policymakers.
Hello.
From the yes, ma'am. I'm just concluding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. From the results of the survey, it was conducted on 157 respondents. The majority of the students were satisfied with the initiatives, help being provided by these countries at the workplaces and the educational institutions, and the students were not willing to come back even once the international flights resume. So this should work. This should serve as a wake-up call for the policy makers, and the policy makers should prove this opportunity. This should prove it as an opportunity for India, especially Punjab, and should become self-reliant in order to attract the students in their country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
And very relevant also. But since we have less time, I will just go to the next person in the presentation, and that is Miss Elvini Loksa. She is a PhD candidate, Faculty of Law, Lund University, Sweden, and she is going to speak on 2030 agenda for sustainable development and EU migration governance, conceptual shifts and normatively quest. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you all for organizing this conference, and thank you for chairing, and also thank you to the interesting presentations that preceded. My subject is a bit more theoretical and overarching compared to the excellent presentations that preceded me. And I have been trying to look about how sustainability, especially after the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Global Compact on Migration, can be understood and applied in the context of EU migration governance. And sustainability and sustainable development have been part of global governance forever. Well, since the 70s, but especially with the Global Compact on Migration and the 2030 Agenda on Migration, sustainability was linked to how we would like to envision migration policy in the future. However, I do believe that there is an issue arising from sustainability as an abstract concept, in the sense that there is no one definition or conceptual idea of what sustainability means. And this means that it's hard to explain what specific hard law obligations derive from sustainability. In this sense, the vagueness of sustainability, and especially the vagueness as it arises also from the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which links sustainability with every problem the world is facing today, allows for the concept to be used under any political agenda, with different notions, both for human rights protection and migration governance, that is from utmost respect for all migrants to cost and benefit analysis of human lives under the pretext of realism. In this sense, in the EU, migration law and its evolution has reached a limit from the 2015-2016 migration crisis. And that was in the sense that the pressure put at the external EU borders created a situation which indicated the inherent deficiencies of EU migration policies. And the EU, in an attempt to respond to a situation which was framed in the context of emergency, put exceptional measures in place using instruments that were outside of law. And exceptional in this regard was also the EU-Turkey agreement. In practice, what has been happening since 2015 is that the crisis and emergency narrative that is prevalent in EU migration policy is accompanied by claims of sustainability. And at the same time, situations of new arrivals to the EU ground are proclaimed as unsustainable. In this context, the EU Commission also put forward a new pact on migration and asylum this September, which in essence outlines the agenda of the new EU Commission for the future of EU migration policies and puts forward a series of legislative proposals. This pact was communicated following some events which took place in March 2020 at the EU-Turkey border with augmented numbers of arrivals and also violent pushbacks of these arrivals. The pandemic that is still blocking mobility to this day, and the fire which destroyed Moria camp. Moria was the most vivid example of the EU migration approach to migration and incoming populations after 2015, which was an approach based on hotspot detention measures for incoming populations and in general degrading treatment of incoming migrants. EU's reaction to the fire that completely burned down Moria is exemplary in the sense that it points out how sustainability is becoming central in the future of EU migration. Commissioner von der Leyen stated that Moria is a stark reminder of the need to find sustainable solutions on migration. Nevertheless, no one knows what sustainable solutions to migration look like or what legal obligations are implied, yet everyone uses the term. Throughout the pact, sustainability seems to appear as resilience in the face of a crisis, but also as the quality of an EU asylum and migration system which demands long-term planning compared to the ad hoc measures that were prevalent in the past years. Furthermore, certain policies are put forward as forming part of an EU sustainable migration, and that is partnerships with third countries, the creations of safe legal pathways, returns and reintegration, as well as sustainable sharing of responsibility between the EU member state. Overall sustainability runs through the new pact on migration and asylum and functions as its overarching goal. In the words of the Commission, this new pact sets out the end-to-end approach needed to make migration management in Europe fair, efficient, and sustainable. It is precisely this overarching nature of sustainability at a moment where there exists so much lack of clarity around the concepts and whether obligations derive therefrom that poses a central problem. In this regard, it is my understanding that the flexibility and the different ways that sustainable migration appears in EU policy documents should serve the claim that sustainability is actually a powerful tool to forge EU-wide political consensus, especially at a time of crisis and contested political views in relation to migration. In this regard, if we understand sustainability as a political concept with a minimum core of maintaining something, then the sustainable EU migration would be a coherent legislative framework grounded on constitutional principles of rule of law and resilient to the shock of crisis. In this regard, it is not the external flows of people, which is framed as a threat, the thing that should shape EU migration, but EU migration should be understood as an inherent part of the constitutional structure of the EU and should develop in line with the human rights frameworks and democratic principles of the latter, but also in line with the demands of the Global Compact, which is only soft law. The emphasis should be more on migrants themselves in relation to access to the EU area and not on migration management in relation to different member states' political agendas. And with this, I would like to conclude and thank you once again for providing me with the opportunity to attend this conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This was really interesting, and actually we got a new perspective. We here in India, in our circle, we hardly talk about it. Thank you very much. So our next paper is by Pooja Priya, intern at GRFDT, and she is from IDSA, New Delhi. Her topic is actually very interesting and something that we very often talk about and read in newspapers, that is social exclusion and racism in New Delhi, a comparative study between Africans and Northeast Indian students. So, Pooja?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all panelists and the audience present. Thank you, ma'am, for the kind introduction. This paper that I am proposing would actually be my paper that I would be taking forward for my doctoral study the following year. The paper focuses on how, in the context of today's current times of globalization, the agenda of most migrant groups relates to the necessities to acquire a better standard of living. However, this need is blinded by certain social issues, such as the prevailing notions of racialization and stigmas about particular community, which further translates into discrimination, as can be seen in the case of Northeastern Indian students and also the African students living in the National Capital Region of India, the New Delhi. The paper distinctly deals with 4 broad areas. The first dealing with the drivers of migration within the global South. The second would be social barriers faced by the Northeastern and African students in Delhi in the process of their social integration into the mainland Indian society. The third would be to look at the role of the Indian government and the law enforcement agencies in taking affirmative actions about the discrimination of the migrant groups. And last but not the least, I would be focusing on the coping mechanisms that the migrant groups develop themselves in order to battle the social exclusion within the city periphery. Now, talking about the definition of who we call migrants are different for different communities. For policymakers, for migrant groups, and for the government, for example, this definition stands different. However, the definition that is given by the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, states that any person who is moving or has already moved across an international border or within a state away from his own, regardless of a person's legal status, the movement is voluntary or involuntary, the causes for the movement, and also the length of the stay in the country of destination. What transforms, now the question arises, is what transforms an individual or a community into a migrant? And these three are, and the answer to that would be the push factors that are involved in making a community and transforming them into a migrant groups. And the push factor are comprising of the economic factor, the socio-economic factor, and the political reasons. Now, when the two migrant groups, which are, one of the migrant groups are a citizen group, which is the Northeast Indian students, and the other group is a non-citizen group. So when this two group of migrants, they come to New Delhi, what are the pull factor that attracts them to the capital city? And that is the employment and the education opportunities which they are unable to get in their home country or their home state. But however, the social and the economic development of the migrant groups, which they aim to achieve in the new place of destination, becomes an illusion. And it becomes an illusion because of the virus of racism that is still prevailing within the city and its periphery. to represent this racism, I would like to bring into context the series of racism and the duration between 2016 to 18, in which the entire country of India faced a lot of racism in terms of the African migrants, such as the popular case of the murder of the Congolese youth in Delhi in the process of hiring a public transport. And these kind of incidents are happening at every day. It has become an everyday phenomena for the African students, where they're getting killed and they are murdered without any reason per se. And in the recent times of COVID-19, the Northeastern students coming from the Manipur, who are my subjects for the study, they have also faced a lot of discrimination during the times of COVID-19 because their home state is under lockdown, and the intensity of the lockdown is even deeper and is even more intense compared to the lockdown in the National Capital Region. So they are bounded to stay in the accommodation of the university. For in this case, I'm stating the University of Delhi hostels where they were planning to stay back, but due to the police orders and due to the government orders, they were asked to go back to their home country, and there was a drift between the two situation. And even the Delhi police, when they were approached for the cause, not much has been done in this regard. Now, next, I would be talking about the migration within the global south. When actually did the migration within the global south become a center of attraction in terms of the World Organization and in terms of research per se? It was only from the year 2000 onwards that the data in terms of migration of global south came into being or came into focus by the policymakers, and it was due to the constant turmoil that was taking place in the underdeveloped countries of the global south, due to which the migrants had to move to the developing nations, for example, India in this case. Also, to give a brief data, the International Migration Report of 2017 states that nearly 84% of all refugees and asylum seekers live in the low and middle income countries in Asia and Africa. And according to the McKinsey Global Institute, it has been estimated that Asian country, including the Middle East, has received more immigrants than Europe between the year 2000 and 2015. What is special about migration within and to India? India, as we all know, is already a pre-segregated country, and usually India receives migrants from Africa, Tibet, Bangladesh, and also a few African countries such as the DRC and Nigeria. And yes, so the push and the pull factors, in the interesting thing to look here is that in my research is that what are the push and the pull factor? Why are they common? Why are they similar in terms of both the migrants groups which are taken under consideration? And it is because of their different racial attributes and cultural differentiation that makes them other. Considered an other category in terms of the mainland community of Delhi. The irony of the situation is the Indian government under the Ministry of External Affairs have taken various initiatives right from the year 1962, in which there were initiatives of Indian Technical and Economic Corporation and also Confederation of Indian Industry, which promises to provide scholarships to African students coming to India. However, when they do come to India, and because they continue to come to India, they are not able to meet the requirement of their development due to the prevailing racism. So what are the social barriers that the migrant groups usually face, and how are they represented? The representation is usually seen in the area of housing and urban violence that represents racism to the highest intensity. However, the issue of housing deals with minor issues compared to the urban violence. So housing deals with increase in the rent, which is usually done by the Indian landlords or landlords who belong to Delhi. Per se, the inability of the migrant groups to claim an agreement for the housing facilities. Although like housing and urban violence both have equal, in both areas, the migrant groups face equal amount of racism, urban violence have acquired a better position in the domain of media, and it is because of the idea of public and private that I would like to bring into notice. The idea is because the urban violence takes place in the public domain, in the outside, in the visible area of the city, that's the reason why urban violence have gained more visibility in the media. In the recent, I have done real-time data covering the students in the Sharda University in Noida by talking to the Nigerian national women who were, I was fortunate enough to get a real on-ground experience of racism in Delhi. They described to me the experience that they face in the Delhi metro, where they're not even allowed to sit in the Delhi metro, and usually they are, when they come back to, when they're returning from Delhi to Noida, they are usually not given seats, although the seats are usually vacant. They're not allowed to sit down, and the Indians are usually the ones who take away, who are claiming the seats. And when they argue, like, why don't you let us sit in the metro? It is usually because you're not supposed to sit here, because of the prevailing racism. And what are the pragmatic actions of the authority holders? Who are the authority holders who are making the pragmatic changes towards battling the racism in the city? It would be the Indian government, the law enforcement agencies, which are the Delhi police, and also, last but not the least, the African and the Northeastern Student Association. So the role of the government would be easily visualized in the cases of, for example, there was a death of a student named Nino Tanya in the year 2000, who belonged to the state of Arunachal from Northeast. The government, the Indian government formed a committee called the Base Barwa Committee, which consisted of 11 members headed by the IS officer BP Base Barwa. And the findings was 86% of the Northeasterns face discrimination in New Delhi, and New Delhi becomes the new hotspot for racial discrimination towards Northeastern people. And the 5 key suggestions that were made by the committee was there should be a new law against discrimination, there should be fast-track courts and special police squads regarding battling the racism. They should
conclude. 1 minute to conclude.
Okay, ma'am. So also the African students, the Indian government has not taken much initiatives regarding battling the racism for the African students or African migrants until and unless they have got the pressure from the diplomats from the African countries. In cases of, as I mentioned before, in the cases of the Congolese student murder in the year 2016, the police has also been effective in enforcing the laws and enforcing battling racism per se. However, not much is done in action. However, there is a lot more sensitization of anti-racism in the city. The role of student association for the Northeastern cell of University of Delhi is to promote the students in the Northeastern region back home, to promote and sensitize them for the racism that they're going to face in the National Capital Region once they come here to pursue education and employment opportunities. Also, one of the most important coping mechanisms of the migrants would be the idea of placemaking. The churches also play as a center of socialization for the African students, and how they get to socialize with other African communities and Indian communities. The methodology for this research would be it would be a primary study, and I would be looking at the idea of post-colonial theory and showing a paradigm shift from the colonial theory to the post-colonial theory in order to understand the different context in which racism was studied during the two periods. In order to conclude, I would like to say that the issue of racism in India, through this paper, I would like to bring it at the forefront of migration and social science research. The paper would focus and would be promoted towards bringing in the idea of migration within Global South, within the context of the GCM, which promotes the safe, orderly, and regular migration, not only for the global north, but also within the Global South, consisting of underdeveloped and developing nations. The paper also would be looking at the immense practicality and on-ground experience of Indo-African diplomatic relations, and also to bring about the affirmative actions taken by both the country of destination and state of destination, and also the country and state of origin in order to fight racism or develop techniques to reduce the racism. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pooja. And let me tell you, this is going to be a very interesting.
Thank you, ma'am.
Study, and we will really look forward to your work on the. I was just wondering, are you also going to compare whether being an Indian citizen and not being a citizen not really matters in terms of their social life? If we can also. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
So that would be interesting if you can bring in that point also, Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for your submission. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Miss Sebastian Charlotti. She is from University of Pisa, Italy. And she is going to speak on migration policy and COVID-19, the security decree in Italy and its impact on health of migrants and asylum seekers. So please go ahead, Sebastian.
And good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fine, awesome. So first of all,
minutes, please.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank our very kind discussant and fantastic presenters who preceded me. I'm sorry I will not be able to share some slides, but I will try to be as clear as possible. So today, I'm speaking about the impact of Italy's migration policy during the lockdown, which was implemented earlier this year to reduce the spread of the coronavirus. And more in particular, my focus will be on the dangerous impact of restrictive migration policies which have been adopted in Italy and have reduced access to healthcare services for migrants and asylum seekers. So to begin with, I would like to take a step back in time one moment and understand how we got to the current precarious situation of migrants in Italy. So during the last decade, Italy's particular position in the Mediterranean Sea made it one of the main entries for migrants and asylum seekers arriving via boat from North Africa, taking on a very dangerous and life-threatening voyage on the sea. In certain years, with the unfolding of the revolts in North Africa and afterwards with the civil war in Libya, numbers of arrivals increased substantially and anti-immigration parties in Italian movements increased their political support. A portrayal of migrants has been constructed which depicted them as invaders, as exploiters of the Italian welfare system. And Italy has been a clear example of the so-called securitization rhetoric applied to migration. So securitization is a media and political discursive strategy which constructs an artificial threat and creates, a climate of fear in the population with the goal of gaining essentially political support. And this rhetoric in Italy was also reinforced by another media strategy adopted especially by anti-immigration movements, which was the border spectacle, which was defined by Nicolas de Genova and called the creation of an image which depicts the legality of migrants as a natural occurrence. So by showing the direct border confrontation between the migrants with their boats being halted by police forces in the act of crossing the sea border. And the result of this ongoing rhetoric has created a very hostile environment for migrants, especially from coming from sub-Saharan countries. And eventually it's led to the first Conte government in 2018, with Matteo Salvini from the League Party, a far-right, populist, anti-immigration, nationalist party leader, as the Minister of Interior. So in the very same year, in 2018, this government adopted the so-called Security Decree or Salvini Decree, whose aim was to cut what was increasingly deemed as a wasteful expenditure in favor of migrants. Access to healthcare services and the overall quality of the Italian reception system for asylum seekers were dramatically reduced. And I will get back to this point a little in a couple of minutes. So bear with me a moment. So when, with the outbreak of the coronavirus in the first months of 2020, Italy became one of the most hit countries from the virus in the world after China. In the beginning, a wave of hostility invested all those who looked like having a Chinese ethnic background, and as they were accused of bringing the disease to Italy. This led to beatings, open discrimination occurring all over Italy against those people. Far-right politicians called for the closure of borders and the harbors, as they also accused African migrants of bringing the disease to Italy and to spread it in the Italian population. So soon, actually, these allegations were proven widely wrong. Well, especially wrong, but nevertheless, this influenced a strong reaction against migrants in the public opinion. And well, the virus in Italy got quite quickly out of control, and on 9th of March, Italy's government issued a statewide lockdown. Actually, today they reinstated a new lockdown, but well, I'm speaking now of what happened in earlier this year, but this lockdown, which was applied on the 9th of March, determined a dramatic restriction on personal freedom and movement. The population was commanded to remain at home, not to go to work, and not exit their own municipalities at any cost. And so I will go on to provide a brief focus on two specific categories of migrants, the undocumented migrants and the asylum seekers, who during this lockdown were particularly at danger because of the tele-immigration policy and the security decree I mentioned earlier. So in fact, during the COVID-19, the restrictive migration policy exacerbated the already acute living conditions of many migrant communities, asylum seekers and undocumented migrants. The restrictions to mobility imposed by the country's lockdown have hit particularly hard those which were most excluded from society and those who live in economic precarity. The community of undocumented migrants who's currently living in Italy is estimated at around 500,000, 600,000 people, a number which has been severely inflated by the recurrent restrictive migration policies, which have been made the maintainment of a legal status in Italy as a migrant increasingly difficult. One key component which statistically increased refusal in the number of asylum recognitions had been the cancellation by the security decree of the humanitarian protection. which was an alternative form of international protection to the refugee system. The increased number of these refusals of this international form of protection, therefore, since 2018, created a new plethora of undocumented migrants living in the country. So there would be many other issues that could be cited in this regard, but I will limit this discussion only to these two. Namely the existential and economic precarity of undocumented migrants, and the generally poor and overcrowded living conditions. As the World Health Organization stated, undocumented migrants must suffer economic, linguistic, and bureaucratic barriers in everyday life. Also the fear of deportation, also of what the Geneva called the permanent deportability, the condition of permanent deportability, makes interaction with public officials, but also with healthcare services, extremely difficult. And moreover, in a hostile environment against migrants, makes it very unlikely for them to seek for help in the case of a potential infection. Moreover, stated by Kluge and other researchers in the Lancet and the medical journal, undocumented migrants are a key component of the homeless community, which has been in extreme difficulty during the country's lockdown, which namely imposed the stay at home. But the state organized emergency shelters, which have been provided for the homeless population, but this was not the case for undocumented migrants, that were actually by definition not registered somehow. So going on, the Italian reform of the security decree changed the asylum system and, as I said, canceled the humanitarian protection. This had been but also accompanied by the redesign of the reception system itself to reduce the quality of both the structures physically which host the asylum seekers and also the services which were provided to them. And in particular, available healthcare services had been significantly reduced. This reform led to an increased use of inadequate facilities which commonly lack hygienic standards and which do not allow for social distancing measures or, for example, to dispose quarantine if someone is diagnosed positive with the virus. In fact, due to budget constraints operated by the security decree, reception facilities suffer from severe overcrowding, creating therefore a fertile terrain for the virus to spread with ease. So to conclude my presentation, mobility restrictions and the economic shutdown of the country represented some of the most severe policies of the lockdown imposed by Italy's government. But such circumstances required an active support for the most disadvantaged members of society, whose income and housing precarity posed a severe threat to the health protection. Migrants, however, were generally being excluded from the provision of, for example, as I mentioned, emergency shelters. Suffering a long-standing hostile environment in Italy, migrants saw a dramatic worsening of the living conditions and an increased exposure to the virus, which has been particularly exacerbated for the most disenfranchised categories of migrants, notably asylum seekers and undocumented migrants. The impact of implementing securitized immigration policies and curtailing of rights and healthcare services to migrants and asylum seekers is yet to be quantified during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, it is certain that the security decree adopted by Italy reduced the access to healthcare services and worsened the living conditions of many migrant communities. The danger posed by the coronavirus, however, should actually prompt the government to provide support to all people living on its territory in the effort of efficiently containing and diminishing the threat of COVID-19. So, thank you very much. I hope I have been stayed in time.
Yes, thank you, Mr. That was well in time and a very interesting paper. Actually, you brought a very pertinent issue. This is something that the governments have to look into, and also the migrants themselves have to look into this, that in case of such emergency situations, they are the ones who suffer the most. So because in India, there is a kind of government, a constant government initiative to make the migrants aware to adopt the legal route, so that in case of any emergency situations, the government will be there to help them. But because of this, not believing in this the so-called legal route, I would say the so-called legal route, the migrants tend to adopt the, they get into this whole perception that they will be able to go and earn and come back and things like that, that they adopt these routes. So actually the governments as well as the migrants both should give it a new thought of, this kind of migration activity. Yeah, I think that was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So our next paper, that is going to be our last paper, will be by Olivia Chwat, and she is from Jagiellonian University, Krakow, Poland, and she's going to speak on, is the work of Ukrainian migrants in Poland decent? A study on the decent work concept of migrants' experience and institutional context. Go ahead, Olivia. Are you there? Amardeep, is Olivia there?
No, madam.
Indian students are migrating in large number countries. They have not been able to attract them.
Hello?
He is not here.
China.
She is not here.
So now with this, we are through with our paper with presentations. I'm sorry, can you hear me? There is some problem in the screen, and there is I think we got
Sebastian is here. Sebastian.
We are hearing you.
Sebastian is here. Has he completed?
Yeah. We are getting
Okay.
a session, no problem. Yes, yeah. Thank you. So thank you all. Thank you very much for a very interesting session, very interesting presentations. And it was such a diversity. And again, we are reminded of the keynote address about the complexifying the complex diasporas, that we are actually hearing in every paper, in every case, we find different emphasis, different topic, just different communities, and how they are dealing with it, and this was very, very interesting session. Thank you very much. And I will open the floor for questions now. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? Please feel free to ask anything. I will just give my concluding comments, but in case in between you want to ask anything, please go ahead. But I just would like to say that because of the lack of time, I did not give my comments to earlier papers, which were very interesting actually. And the first paper by Dr. Binita Behera was actually very interesting. Maybe you could have thrown some light on how these kind of the global compact of migration and these things, is it really impacting the condition there? Is it really making any difference? Are the governments listening? Has it made any significant change in the and
Ma'am, at least from my point of view, it seems, but of course it varies from, it would be something to see in the global south, the countries in the global south and the other countries where people migrate. So I was talking about very predictable migration routes from the developing to the developed countries. So I can say that because of that, and plus the fact that these women were going, it was work related migration, and these were skill sets that were required in the destination countries. So maybe because of that, it was a smooth transition, like, somebody in the health sector, etc.
studies that I have seen, women do find a sense of liberty in
Yes.
situations, and that is why they are more comfortable when they leave.
Right.
Because to find an identity, to build a space for their own, where they are also economically independent.
Right.
So,
right.
Convenient for them. Actually, I was looking at some studies and I found out that that's true also. If you see that in case of return migrants, women are the ones who object to returning back. In most of the cases, it is the men who prefer to
return back. Yeah.
and are not ready to come back to India. So
Right.
that actually is a very interesting aspect that you brought in. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, anything else on women? Something that I really love to work on, talk about.
Ma'am, I was not able to cover the other few more case studies, which were from some European countries to say a country like Sweden. So there also the reasons were, of course, in the beginning it was for family reunification or for joining their partners, but still the integration was sort of, it was complete, because they would say, like, there's a woman called Melinda, name changed, and she was from North Carolina, USA, and she got married to a Swede, and she settled there. I mean, it's a permanent kind of a thing. And she also had to say that the social security services of Sweden are very good, and that's why, and the education system is very good. So that's why she intends to stay permanently for the sake of her children. It is better than as compared to America. So yeah.
Very important. But in case of supposing if women is migrating to Gulf countries, one of the Gulf countries,
right.
So then what? Also something that looked into because
right.
So, yeah, thank you. That was
Thank you, ma'am.
And so, anything else, Pooja? Do you want to ask anything?
No, ma'am. Thank you.
That your paper was very good, and please all the best for your PhD on the topic. That's right.
Thank you so much.
I was just wondering, have you ever tried to look into some kind of discrimination the Bihari students face?
Well, ma'am, I'm from Bihar, so yes, I do intend to look into that sector, but as of now, I believe that this particular topics deserves the most amount of attention. Therefore, I would like to take it for my PhD. But of course, once I'm done with my PhD, I would like to take it further, because as a researcher, we always try to cover topics, right? So,
within your study, you can touch upon that topic,
Yeah. maybe a chapter or two on them. Yeah.
Maybe just here and there reference, because there are other communities also who are facing discrimination, maybe not as high as the northeastern is, but
yes.
but
And also, it's very interesting to look at the minority communities. Yes, like not of course on the range of race or racialization, but also in terms of stigmatization, which also works in parallel with racialization. Yeah. So bringing in the minority communities is also what I intend to do in my paper. Yeah.
thank you.
And Miss Pooja, may I give some comment? Your paper was very interesting and very well presented also.
Thank you.
Like it would be interesting if you would also look into what are some of the coping mechanisms that these communities have at their level. Like how are they coping and what are they doing to, better integrate and better, be part of the neighborhood in Delhi, wherever they are.
Okay. Thank you, Binita, for that question, for the submission, actually. In fact, I have tried to incorporate the coping mechanisms. That's the last section of the paper that I'm looking at currently.
Right.
I have also talked about the idea of placemaking. If you were listening, I talked about how the placemaking in the form of religious communities in the terms
Right.
of marriage. Okay,
Right,
also a way and the manner in which the migrant groups socialize with the communities of the mainland India. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, thank you so much for the submission. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now the other paper on students in Australia, from student migrants, that was from Nana. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, your voice is breaking. I'm not able to hear. No, ma'am. Your voice is breaking a lot.
You are fine, ma'am. You can.
No, I'm not here.
Yes, ma'am. Now you are audible.
Okay.
Actually, I was
Ma'am, actually, you are not audible. Your voice is breaking.
So let me have my earphone, maybe.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is better. Have you looked into something about the fee structure and all that in these universities who have recruited these foreign students, and actually because of this whole COVID situation, the classes are not running and things like that?
Yes, ma'am. I looked into it, but what it was seen that after COVID-19, these colleges or the universities, I'm sorry, are not providing with the visas, but they are providing with the AIPs. They are just providing the permission for the online classes, but there's no provision for the reduction in the fee mechanism. But
yes. Yeah. So is the government taking? I was just wondering, has the host and the home governments both,
yes,
actually, you should actually in your paper bring this matter up, that whether all the students who have taken loans
Okay.
to study in foreign universities, are they supposed to pay at the same rate in the Indian banks from wherever they have taken loans? That is a big issue, because from there they also earn something to help the parents. And one of the biggest attraction these foreign universities have is the exposure the students get.
Yes, ma'am.
When they go to study there, and their exposure to the whole education system, world education system, where they are meeting all kinds of students, students from various countries. They are learning more, and also exposure to job market.
Yes, ma'am.
That they will be denied of in case of online classes.
Yes,
so how actually this is going to be compensated? How the governments are looking at it, even the Indian government. For Indian government also, it's a big issue, because their citizens get work from all over the world when they go out to study and work. So I think both host and the home country are responsible towards the student migrants, both home and the host. And I think you should look into that matter.
Ma'am, definitely. Thank you for suggestion. I'll definitely look into it.
Thank you. Okay, so anything else?
Yes, ma'am. I have a submission to make to Tanveen, if I may.
Yes, please.
I would like to suggest that, when we talk about online classes, so online classes are only facilitated to the bachelor's and the master's students, right? What about the vulnerabilities that the research students face? For example, if you have already applied to a certain English-speaking country or even European countries, for example, and you do not really know, because seeking the scholarship is one major aspect. The funding falls into one major aspect of, let's say, a doctoral or postdoc student. So even if you claim that funding, what is the possibility? Or even like the master students are getting to fly back to Europe to pursue their masters. But, I think it would be interesting to look at when and how, like what are the measures that are being taken for, let's say, the doctoral student, because of course, you may know that being a doctoral student, they're benefiting the university as much you're benefiting yourself, So what are the measures that are taken in regard to this would be really interesting, I believe.
Thank you, Pooja. Definitely, I'll be taking this into consideration. Thank you so much for your suggestion.
Okay.
May I ask one question to Pooja?
Yes, sir.
Please do, Amardeep.
Pooja, you can share your field experiences during COVID time.
Sorry, sir, you're not audible, actually. Not very clear.
You can share your field experiences during COVID time.
Did I do my field experiences during COVID time? Actually, sir, I have been conducting my pilot study from the last year of my bachelor's, and I continued it for 2 years of my master's. But I did not bring it to the formal discussion because it is still considered a pilot study, But I've been going to my field since the last 3 years, so it was not really in the times of pandemic.
Okay.
I hope I've answered your question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so anything else, or should we conclude the session? And all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
okay. Thank you very much. That was a very, very interesting, and the discussion also was very interesting. And I am really actually taking a lot of new information with me from your papers. Thank you very much. So, bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, ma'am.
And all the best for your studies. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
Ma'am, thank you so much for chairing the session. And I also would like to thank all the participants for attending the conference. Thank you all.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. The room will start at 5:15 p.m. Indian time. And meanwhile, will screen some YouTube videos of previous sessions.